Thank you. I just realized that if I'm quick, I might make Janet Yellen's vote at 5:30 this afternoon. Thanks for that very kind introduction. Let me just say, Governor, thank you to you for your leadership. And if you'd like to tax newspapers at a higher rate, I'm all for it. I just want you to know that. I want to also compliment George Holding, Congressman George Holding. What a great addition he's been to the North Carolina delegation, and I think he's probably the smartest individual that we've got in the delegation. And I want to say this, that regardless of party affiliation, the North Carolina delegation always comes together on issues that affect our state. That's unique in Washington, and you should be proud of that. Let me also say to you that may not know this, that when the governor talked about higher education, you need to realize that North Carolina produces the second largest pool of graduates of higher education annually of any state in the country. Only California surpasses us, and anybody that's thinking about making a capital investment in California has got to be crazy. So we're in the catbird seat, and it's good to see that we've got a governor that recognizes the greatest asset that we've got are our children and our grandchildren that are coming through the system. Now, Thad told me to speak on things that brought some predictability and credibility to what's going on in Washington. I thought I'd devote my 15 minutes to global warming. Helen Keller was asked one time by a reporter if she could think of anything worse in life than to lose your sight. And she paused for a moment and she responded this way: to have my sight and lose my vision. What we're faced with right now in Washington is a fight about vision. Now, I know when you read the paper, or you watch the evening news, or you see people that are paid these ungodly amounts of money to tell you everything that's really going on up there, you think that you've got just a system that's dysfunctional. No, you've got a system that our founding fathers designed for a very specific reason. They wanted the checks and balances to be in place. They wanted the three branches of government to have some oversight by each other. You know, it would be a lot prettier and a lot easier just to get rid of the House or the Senate, to have one body, to let the executive branch not have the responsibility of proof to the legislative branch or the judicial branch to run off by themselves and not be concerned. But our founders believed that that was an important structural and permanent part of this country. Washington's not broken. It's not broken. It's working exactly like they designed it to work. But we've got a struggle right now between which vision of the future America's headed for. The question is, on some people's agenda, is to grow government bigger. And on the other side, to contract government, to make it smaller and cheaper, to consolidate. I would suggest to you exactly what business has been faced with for the last several years. As a matter of fact, when you talk about contraction, the only entity in America that has not deleveraged is the federal government. How could deleveraging have been so cleansing for the financial industry and it not be important to the federal government? So when the governor talks about making a state decision on unemployment because of the financial obligations, I actually think he should be applauded. I wish when I got back to Washington at 6 o'clock tonight, the debate was about extending unemployment benefits and that they were paid for with money that we had cut from somewhere else, but that won't be the case at 6 o'clock tonight. So the battle will continue between those that believe that government should get bigger and that government should contract. Let me give you the predictable thing in Washington right now. We have a $17 trillion debt. 17 trillion with a T. Now, it's tough for anybody in this country, anybody in the world, to really visualize what $1 trillion is, but let me attempt to do it. Let me just hold up 7 federal programs for you. $1 trillion is 100% of the federal investment in K through 12 education. It's 100% of the federal investment in higher education. It's 100% of the cost of the National Institute of Health, 100% of the cost of the National Science Foundation. It's 100% of the federal partnership with states for infrastructure, bridges, roads, sidewalks. It's 30% of the Veterans Administration budget. It's 100% of our national defense. That's active and reserve troops. That's bases, domestic and foreign. Those 7 programs come up to $946 billion. So for those that might have had the luxury of sitting at home and saying, when you go back, just cut $1 trillion out and get in balance. Well, if you're going to do that and you're not going to reform entitlements and you're not going to reform the tax code, I just described to you the 7 programs you're going to cut. The federal government is run on the additional $450 billion that we've got left over and above what we spend on entitlements. $450 billion runs all the federal agency and all the programs that affect you in the businesses that you're in the communities that you live in, all the federal employees and the benefit package that take care of them. For some, you look at that and say, how can you do that for $450 billion? Well, I'm trying to make a point to you that those programs are important. Now, where there are duplications, sure, we should take care of those. But the meat of federal money today is in the entitlement program. It's in Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. If we're not willing to reform those, then we've got to get used to having trillion-dollar deficits. Now, we've been able to stumble along for the last 6 years because we've had historically low interest rates, and I'll let the economists and the bankers get more into this. But our interest rate for sovereign debt has averaged about 2.4 to 2.6%. That's the average. Our historical average in the United States is 5.6%. We've been half of what historically we should be paying to finance our sovereign debt. When a 10-year bond was selling for 2.6% and lower, what was it selling for in Italy or Spain? Almost 6 or 7%, financing their sovereign debt. Yet our debt to GDP in this country is higher than it is in Italy or in Spain. At some point, the marketplace is going to reflect the cost of sovereign financing based upon the risk, which is debt to GDP. Now, you may think, hearing these numbers come out of me, that I'm pessimistic about our future. I'm not. I've never been more optimistic about the United States and, more importantly, about the state of North Carolina. It's because we're in 21st century jobs. The investments that are being made here are in the 21st century and not the 20th century. I see a United States that's having an energy renaissance. Energy has now permitted the United States to be the low-cost manufacturer in the world. You remember when that used to be China? Now we've got more businesses contacting my office saying, I want to come back from China and come back to North Carolina than we ever have saying, help me get there. And Tom Ross, you're a big part of it because of the education system here. We've got so much to be thankful for. But to capitalize on it fully, it means we have to make some tough decisions. The governor's made it at the state level. Well, Kelly King and I were talking, and Kelly said, you know, one of the best things that happened was this agreement to extend a budget deal for 2 years, and I agree wholeheartedly. But I got to be honest with you, we didn't fix anything. We came to an agreement about how much money we were going to spend for the next 2 years, but we didn't fix anything. Here's the recipe for financial sustainability in the United States. It's entitlement reform, it's tax reform, and it's growing the U.S. economy at 4.5% plus for 10 years in a row. It's not one of those. It's not two of those. It's all three of those. John Medlin used to sit down with me about once a month, and it was always an educational thing. Kelly, he'd pull out a paper napkin and his pen, and he'd always jot something that he'd gotten out of the Federal Reserve report that made no sense to me, but I acted like I understood 100% of it. But John sat down one day and he said, "Let me show you this." And he drew this little graph, and he said, "Richard, unless you fix things, here's where our country ends up." Now, if you can prove to me that we can grow the economy at 10% plus for 30 years, maybe we can do it without tax reform or without entitlement reform. But I believe just to have sustainable economic growth, we've got to make massive changes in tax reform in this country, just like we have in North Carolina. If we do that, I think this opportunity that I see nationally and in our state is ours for the taking. I was struck as I came back from London last year, and I'm reading the Sunday Telegraph, and there was a short piece on a book that somebody had written called Lord Digby Jones. And I just want to read you an excerpt from that in my conclusion. It said, "Consider for a moment a small country which ventured out from a place rather distant from the rest of the world, but which proceeded to create the most powerful economic and military empire the world had ever seen. It gave the world a common language, common currency, the rule of law, the freedom of citizenship, tariff-free trade, and peace. But after that amazing achievement in the span of just 3 or 4 generations, it was all over. I speak, of course, of Rome. Rome didn't fall apart because the Huns came out of the forest or the Scots over the wall. Rome fell apart in Rome. It became complacent, lazy, and indolent. Its citizens stopped caring for each other. It became a society for the selfish. Its people concentrated on their rights and not their responsibilities. As it unknowingly approached its own demise, it lacked the leadership and blamed everyone but itself. Well, I'll let you put into context Rome relative to where we are. I'm here to tell you that the opportunities is ours for the taking. Government's not going to be the solution. In many cases, government is the impediment to our success. But as Rome proved, it's not about government. It's about people. It's about the population. It's about our individual commitment to each other. You know, we live in the greatest country in the world. De Tocqueville said that America was the greatest country in the world. And when he went back across the ocean and was asked to define exactly what he meant, he said, "The American people have the capacity to give of their time and their resources to help anybody in need." Tocqueville didn't say government, state, local, or federal. De Tocqueville said the American people have the capacity. Well, let me end where I started. There's a vision battle on in this country. The vision is, which direction do we go? Do we grow government or do we contract government? Ronald Reagan used to say he never could understand what was so special about the United States Constitution. Every country had one. He said, it wasn't until I read theirs that I understood what was so special about ours. Theirs starts, we the government. Ours starts, we the people. It is ours for the taking. It's the American people that have to play that role. Thank you for being here. God bless.
I'm just glad you're still here. You've listened to two politicians, now you get an economist.